Hello and welcome to episode 143, Property Mastermind podcast with Bob Anderson and Hilary Saxton. This week we are talking why 2024 is a fabulous year to get started in property development. Bob and I will unpack the economic reasons, the population reasons, and just the reasons why you should jump in on property development. Episode 143. Welcome everybody, welcome listeners, and thank you so much for the fabulous comments, etc. we get. Really enjoy them. Love the emails, thank you, and love the positive comments that we get as well on YouTube. Hit subscribe on YouTube if you are watching there. That makes it work so more people can find us. I think that's how that works. And if you've got any questions, feel free to email them in. This week the book is going to this one, Property Millionaires Exposed, Neil and Brown. Neil, this is in the post for you. Can't wait to start working with you. Alrighty, Bob, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here, as always.
Oh, good. What's your tip for today, Bob?
Tip. Here's a tip.
What?
Always have a tip ready.
Are you saying be prepared?
Be prepared. Be prepared's a good tip. Always be prepared, like a good Boy Scout or a Girl Guide, or do they even have them anymore?
I don't know.
Be prepared.
I think they have the biscuits. How good are they?
Biscuits good.
The Girl Guide biscuits. Bob, before we jump in, we're going to be talking about why it is a really good time to get into property development 2024. We are recording this just after Easter this comes out, so This is our early April. So that, I said for a Toastmaster, that's not good. You don't hear those come out of my mouth too often. But for early April, it is a really good time to let people know that it is a good time in the in the year in the market as well.
Yeah.
To be into property.
And beyond this year too.
Yeah, starting now is a good time. And we've always said that. You have always said the best time to plant a tree is now, and the second best time is 20 years ago.
Yeah. Well, the best time was 20 years ago and the second best time is now.
That's right, I got it wrong.
That'll do us.
yeah. And, nobody's perfect. But, so Bob, I've got a list of questions and I know you've had a quick look. Don't act like you're
very
surprised.
Quick.
Yeah, you've had a quick squiz.
A scant view.
Because what were you doing while I was doing this?
I was structuring a loan document, if you need to know.
Really?
Or just tidying it up, because it's done by a lawyer, but always needs a bit of a touch-up.
Was that okay? That's cool.
Isn't that exciting? Everybody out there, Bob was structuring a loan document.
Yeah. Well, he does structure loan documents. In fact, it's not. I don't want to say the words, and I'm going to say them. It's pretty low. That's another whole podcast. But recently, you have had to fix up the work of valuers and financiers.
No, definitely, yeah.
On more than one occasion, over the same deal, go back and say you've missed this, you've done this incorrectly, and just crazy.
Yeah, you just can't rely on experts being experts sometimes. No,
and I think that that's probably a really good tip today. Don't always rely on...
Okay, there's my tip, my late tip.
Your late
it's
tip?
a late tip.
Yeah, there's two tips today.
Yeah, we scratched the first one, that was an early scratching. Late tip is, can't always rely on experts being experts.
So you've gone down the horse racing route?
Yeah, well, why not?
Yes, why not?
Wine not.
Hey, while we're on wine, 3 wines in, here's a chance to plug my book. Everyone's like, just get onto the podcast. You're like 5 minutes in and you're still talking about. We've given away 2 tips and Bob's just pointed out why. But 3 wines in, if you don't have a copy, jump onto hilarysaxton.com and get one. For those who have tried to sign up to the email newsletter, which there's been a few, we fixed the glitch. I've had quite a few emails saying, I actually tried to get your newsletter in, which is nice. Isn't that nice? They came to me directly.
All fixed. Okay,
but,
get on with it.
Okay.
Come on, girl.
Okay. As a profiler, that is so out of Bob's character because he's the most patient person in the world.
I'm being playful.
I know, but I'm just like, that's not like you. Okay, here we go. Bob, how will the economy, the better economy that we're in now...
Improving
economy, affect development for 2024? But before you answer that question, I know that there will be people saying, we're in a terrible state, the economy's terrible and food's going up. Man, can you just elaborate? I'm sorry, I know you're not an economist and you're a developer, you stay in your developing lane, you have opinions, so I'm keen on your opinion.
Even economists have opinions. You put 20 economists in a room and ask them a question, you could get 20 answers.
Okay, cool.
But, just looking out there, what are the sort of some of the drivers that are out there, and we've seen them, and we've seen them change a lot. Interest rates are an obvious one. They're a big driver, and last year, I think, and a little bit of this year, 13 changes in interest rates. But where are they? And did it have to happen? Well, yeah, of course it did. It was never going to stay at 2% or whatever it was. That was just a bit of a extended holiday post-COVID. So, of course, they were always going to correct, and they did. But there's other things that drove it at the same time. We had inflation, and of course that always drives the RBA to get out their baseball bat, or if you like, their sledgehammer to crack a peanut, and away we go with 13 rate rises. But anyway, that's over now. Will there be another one? Oh, I don't know. There could be another little one, but there might not be. They're looking a lot at unemployment. That's where they really, or should I say employment? Well, employment or unemployment, one's the inverse. That's where they put a lot of their attention, because what they don't really want is a lot of wage growth, because that will drive inflation. And their whole point of existence is to control inflation, trying to keep it between that band. Now, it's run right outside of the band.
Which band are you speaking of?
Oh, they'd like it to be between 2 and 3%, but it's never going to be there forever. And then when it's not, they have to take action, and that's okay. They take action. But I was thinking, I remember back in COVID, where it started to rise. It was about 5.7% before COVID, and people were saying, "Oh, it's going to hit 15." The end of the world. People will be living in the streets, and peaked at about 7.5%. And we've had other things happen. But let's not concentrate too much on that. But we know inflation's out there. We know, and the drivers are food and petrol and house prices. They're the items that have really held it up, and so it's not an easy thing to get those things under control, and particularly if there is wage growth. So the RBA is always looking at that numbers, but look, it's slowly going in the right direction. Inflation downwards, which is the right direction, of course. And
so
that's just one factor, really.
Yeah, as you're talking, it got me thinking, Bob, about the people that do property development. We pretty much work with everyday people, just people like you and me and our neighbour and anybody. So will this, and I was going to go down this road until now, will this pressure that some people may feel because of the increase in food and petrol and housing make them look and say, I don't want to live like this anymore, I want to become a property developer? Would you think that's a thing? Or more likely they'll be thinking, I can't do this because it's out of my reach even more now?
Well, the best way, look, if somebody's suffering financially, and I've had points in my life when I have, so I don't think I haven't.
You're saying.
But
yes.
the best antidote is to make more money. And it's as simple as that. Now, that's not easy for a lot of people. They say, well, what am I going to do? Take on a second job or a third job? I'm going to stack shelves, drive Ubers and that sort of thing. And that's what most people do, because that's what they understand. If they need more money, get a second job. But property development is a part-time job when you start out. If you're just doing one project, one small project, 2 or 3 like subdivision, a duplex, maybe up to 3 townhouses, it's just a little project. It's very part-time. You don't need, that's not a full-time job. That's not at all. So, strangely enough, most people don't realise you can take on property development as a part-time job. Obviously, educate yourself a bit more than you might have to stack shelves or drive an Uber, but that's how most people start. We start off as a part-time job. That's how I started it off. I did my first project, my second project, I had a day job. So, we're getting off it a little bit. But when we're talking about the economy, I did talk about inflation, only because it's related to interest rates, because that's what the RBA uses to try and drive inflation down. That has an effect on everybody. It has an effect on people who have debt, not just property debt. Of course it does. And people buying. But it hasn't seemed to have slowed things down a lot, those interest rate rises. And it's sort of gotten back to what is probably the 20 or 30 year average in terms of interest rates. They're never going to stay down around 2%. But people seem to have, by and large, coped with it. And obviously there's some people that are struggling, particularly lower income earners, I guess, or maybe people who just went a bit wild with their borrowings. But generally speaking, it appears that people are coping well. They've got a lot more equity than they had 3 or 4 years ago. They've built up, in often cases, they've kept paying their mortgage at higher rates, so when they were low. So they've got quite a lot of fat built in there as well. So it doesn't seem to be the biggest boogie at all.
There's some good words there, Bob. Fat and boogie in the same sentence.
Boogie man, maybe.
Got some fat in their property and there's not too many big boogies.
So where's it going? Well, inflation's getting under control. Interest rates are pretty well where they're going to be.
Yeah.
A lot of people are talking about perhaps a potential drop in interest rates, into 2024. I don't know. I think a lot of that will depend on employment rates or unemployment rates, whatever way you want to look at it. And at the moment, unemployment has dropped again. It's dropped down to about, in February, I think it's dropped to nationally to about 3.7% from about 4.2%. So it's back to those really low rates we had back in 2023. And that's what the RBA is looking at. So you're not going to see, while they're around there, you're not going to see a drop in interest rates. You probably won't see an increase unless there's a lot of wage growth.
So with that, why is that good for property development?
Well, why is it good for property development? I mean, interest rates are tapped out, pretty much, near enough to tapped out. I mean, if you get another 25 basis points, it is what it is, but that's not much, and they're pretty much tapped out. We know inflation's sort of pretty much under control, so as long as wage growth doesn't blow out, interest rates will be locked in where they are. But look, you could take it back to the old supply and demand. The basics of economics, supply and demand. We are undersupplied nationally for dwellings, and we have been almost forever, and it's getting worse. So the beautiful thing is, as property developers, we create shelter, we create dwellings for people to live in. Even if we subdivide land, that's the first of 2 steps. Once the land's subdivided, something will get built on it. So we supply shelter, food and shelter, I keep saying it, 2 of the basic necessities of life. And we're not in the food business, but we are in the shelter business, and people have to have shelter. And so it's in diminishing supply. If you think about it, look at building starts. Building starts, or building approvals, I should say, have been dropping now for a while. I think they dropped 13-14% in the last 12 months. Now, building approvals are the beginning stage of building dwellings that people have to live in. And the other thing is, a lot of people look at building approvals and they say, oh look, the approvals have been dropping and dropping and dropping. What that means in 12 months or in 2 years is going to be less housing.
Yeah, more demand.
The demand's strong, it's getting stronger.
Yeah.
So just put demand aside for one moment. Just let's look at the number of dwellings. Less and less dwellings. Building approvals don't tell the whole story, because often people get a building approval but they don't go on to build. So what we really should be talking about is completed buildings. I've heard that about 17% on average of approvals never get built, and at the moment it's probably higher. So why are there less approvals? Well, if you wind back in time a little bit.
How far are we going back?
12 months, 18 months. People started to spook. We had the...
As opposed to spruik.
Did
you watch the news?
We had the post-COVID boom in values, and then we had the correction that had to happen after that. But if something goes up 70% and comes back 15%, it's still a pretty good boom.
Yes,
so that was had. And then, for lots of reasons, we had inflation. Now we've had the increase in interest rates. But we said, that's tapped out. But a lot of building hasn't gone on, and a lot of approvals haven't been made. So we're going to have a lag. We're already undersupplied today. In 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, we're going to be more undersupplied because the stuff's not in the system. And why is that? Well, we had that rapid rise in build costs. We had, and that's settled down a lot. Most of the big QS, quantity surveillance firms, building companies, they're saying, well, look, it's probably somewhere between about 4 and 6% per annum is the growth in increase in construction costs. So that's that's quite containable compared to what it was. But we had that. We had massive build increases. That made some projects, a lot of projects, particularly big ones, made them unprofitable. They never went ahead. Some that did go ahead, they finished them, but they didn't make the profits they wanted to make. And so a lot of that settled down. The high escalation in build costs has settled down, interest rates have settled down. But while a lot of that was going on, a lot of people just withdrew and didn't do much. Not us.
No.
Because we look beyond that. We look beyond the immediate things that are happening. And so we were aggressively looking for development sites when other people weren't, and knowing that whatever we buy, our product's going to come on the market to be sold in 18 months or 2 years. Big developments, big apartment buildings, which we don't do, they could have a 4 or 5 year window. By the time they find sites, negotiate sites, eventually get their approvals and get their building permits, and they're a couple of years in, and they're 2 or even 3 years building those massive buildings. They're looking, when they're looking at a site, they're looking at selling a lot of that stock. Now they'll try and sell off plan as well, of course, to help their finance, but completed stock's 5 years away. We're doing small projects, so our window's a lot shorter, depending on what it is. It could be anything from like typical small projects, 12 months to 2 years. A lot of it depends on how fast councils approve things.
We're saying we're talking about us and the people that, like you listening, who are either doing development or wanting to be doing development.
Yeah, all the people that we mix with every day, people in our community that are doing, not big projects.
No.
And so what we're looking at is this lag that down the track there's going to be an even bigger shortage of property. The government realised this a long time ago.
What are they doing about it, Bob? I don't even know what they're doing. What are their incentives? What's really happening?
Well, we've had this talk about building 1.6 million properties by, 2029. I can't even, I actually ignore it, so I haven't taken a lot of notice of it, because to me, all that stuff's hot air. Anyway, whatever it is, it's way behind. I think there's been like 170,000, where projection should have been 2 and 3 times. It's just not going to happen. The government's not going to drive it. They can't drive it.
Can't they talk to the councils about being a little bit less ridiculous?
Well, we're talking about federal government. Don't get involved with councils. State governments have a little bit of power over certain councils. There's a lot that could be done to speed it up. It never happens. There's lots of talk about it. Doesn't really happen much. Although, in fairness, some councils in some areas have introduced some fast-track methods of getting approvals, and like CDCs in New South Wales and other things in other places. But generally speaking, it is what it is. It's just a process. We just got to go through it, and that's what it is. But there's going to be that lag.
So that just shows why now is a great time to be in property development, because the lag we're heading toward is huge.
That's
a growing lag.
Yeah, and that's the supply end of it.
Yeah. There's not the demand end.
Not the demand end.
There's two. I actually never put those two together as two different issues. I put them as one. One being supply.
Well, they're related.
But they both have their own.
I mean, if you've got oversupply and low demand, that generally produces that's like the old boom and bust.
Yeah.
So in times in the past, look, property goes up for a lot longer than it either plateaus or corrects. Now, I'm not necessarily a great proponent of the 7-year cycle. There's a lot around that. But if you think about property does go up in value, and that's a proven fact for hundreds of years. And because it goes up in value, it goes up for a longer period of time than it doesn't go up. And sometimes it flatlines, sometimes there's a bit of a correction after a rapid rise, but most of the time it's going up. And so, as developers, we're relying generally on that growth, that when we get there, whatever something's selling for today is more likely going to sell for more when we actually get the product produced. But back to the demand, and a lot of the demand is built around population growth. Yeah,
which is growing. Was it 500,000 more? And I know we've talked about this many times, but not in this context, I don't think.
Yeah. So we've got natural organic growth, and that's births. We have more births than we do deaths, and that's why the population of Australia grows. But we also import people, if we can say that.
I don't know if we can.
Well, I
For
just said it.
for anyone who's upset by that, I apologise.
No, immigration, that's what it is.
Okay, importing people.
Yeah. And so these people, and there was no overseas migration for a few years during COVID, obviously. And so we had all this pent-up demand of people that would have come here if they could have but couldn't. And then plus, post-COVID, it made a lot of people realise how safe a country Australia really is in the way that we got through it compared to lots of other countries.
Yeah.
And so it made the demand even stronger. And so we've had an enormous amount of overseas immigration happen in the last 2 years. I think somewhere around 400,000, and I believe it's even growing more and more. So these people that are coming into Australia, they're not refugees. I mean, to get in here, you have to have solid, often, credentials. You have to be able to add something to the Australian economy. So these people are often coming in with degrees or multi-degrees, and they're going to add, and some of them are like credentialed tradespeople and that sort of thing. So they're going to add to the economy, add to the country. They're going to get jobs. They're going to pay tax and all that sort of thing.
Like me, I add to the economy.
You do, every day. And so all these people coming in now, yeah, sure, a majority of them do go to Sydney or Melbourne, but the other capitals get the spin-off, and they often rent when they arrive, but within 2 years they tend to buy.
Yeah.
And so we're just seeing the beginning of that. So we've got the natural population growth, we've got overseas migration, putting a lot of pressure on dwellings, or even in the rental market while they rent. And the rental market is, vacancies are record lows. We've seen massive increases in rent. And so that's all back to demand for property. Whether people rent and live in a property or they buying a property, they still need a property. They need a dwelling to live in, and we supply them as developers. We'll supply rental property, we'll supply property for owner-occupiers. People have to have it, food and shelter. We're back to that. And a huge demand and an undersupply.
And those two broken down show that, and why now is a great time.
Yeah, that can be localised to a degree.
For sure.
I mean, you can say regional or you can say capital cities. And we know in Australia most people, I think it's over 80%, living in capital cities. And even within a capital city, it can be more localised into like suburban areas as well. So it's not just flat the same across the whole country. But we have to generalise because we're talking to people all around the whole of Australia.
Yeah.
As developers, we focus down to suburban and sub-suburban level when we're developing.
Even just the Bob, when you said, you pretty much compartmentalise, and I'm just reflecting back to where you said, I don't know if I completely agree with the 7-year cycle, and I know you're going to get some reactions on that, but I think what you were talking about as well is that's a very generalised comment. In some places, in other places that doesn't even exist at all, does it? Not really. No,
and even in property cycles, you can have outside interference, like the government.
Yes.
As soon as the government interferes in property, and when I say interfere, sometimes it's good interference.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't agree with the interference, but whatever it is, they have an impact on it. In other words, it's not left to the market. That's what I call organic. If you leave everything alone, let the market sort itself out, it will. But then sometimes the governments will interfere. I mean, there's always permanent interference in there anyway. I mean, the first home owners schemes that the federal government backs and that state governments come in and out, that's not a bad interference because we need to get younger people into properties. God knows it's hard enough. But that still is an interference to the way 100% free market works.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it should be like that. It shouldn't.
You're just making
people
a comment.
That need to. So, interference, usually by a government, and could be state government even, can move that property dial.
Yeah.
And that's what happens.
Bob, what about people wanting to get started and here we are saying it is a good time, and I think because we always go, well, we're developing right now, so that's a good sign, and we're just everyday people
when
like
are we
you
not
and I.
developing?
Yeah, exactly. What about the cost of borrowing money? How is that affecting the market now? And I've got my own opinion on this, but
Yeah, well, that interest rates affect different people differently.
Yes.
If you're a young family you've got a decent sized loan, interest rates go up. Of course, anybody who's got a loan and interest rates go up, it's going to affect. That means your repayments are higher. In property, if you think about it, 50% of all households don't even have a loan. A lot of people get shocked when they hear that because everybody thinks, everyone's got a mortgage, Not many people.
Is it really? 50% don't have a mortgage?
No, it's 100% owned.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Is that in Australia? Just Australia?
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know about anywhere else. And so it's only, mortgages on house loans only going to affect half the population anyway.
Yeah, half of the people that own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, beyond that, yes, of course it has an effect. And particularly if, people got used to those low interest rates and thought, it's going to be like that forever, which would have been a bit naive.
I mean, from a developing sense, though.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's back up to about where it used to always be.
Yeah.
Like on average, probably 20, 30 year average, sort of back to where it used to be. So when we saw interest rates go up, let's say we were looking at a project, it looks nicely profitable, and then interest rates go up. Well, that makes it less profitable because your interest component's higher. And we did have quite a few interest rate rises. Almost every month we got 0.25%. So that has an effect, let's say, on a project over that period of time, and as does build cost. Now, we've been through the worst of all that, and there were some tough times, with interest rates and with build costs, but I'm sort of looking at 2024 onwards because that's what we're talking about today, and that's why I said earlier, interest rates pretty much capped out. Escalation in building costs quite moderate. And so those issues aren't quite there now. People that are buying our product at the other end, whether they're investors or owner-occupiers, the market is what it is, and people just get used to it. There's been very few defaults on loans, and Australia traditionally it has very few defaults. Even when interest rates were low, remember the banks, when they were assessing your capacity to borrow, had a buffer of 2 and 3%. So even when interest rates were, let's say, 2%, a lot of the calculations that were done by the financiers, by banks predominantly, was based on a 5% interest rate.
Right.
So to get a loan, you had to qualify as being able to afford a 5% loan, even though the loan may have been 2%. So if it hits like 6.5%, you're really only 1.5% above what your capacity was back then. So that's why it hasn't been that. They were never assessed at 2% for very good reasons. Now you can see why.
Yes.
So it's less and less of an issue. So going forward, and this is what we need to look at, and something I wanted to touch on, very few people talk about it, is replacement value.
Oh, yeah. You and I talked about that before.
Yeah. If let's say you're looking at some townhouses today, it's a 3-pack of townhouses, it's just been finished.
You're looking at purchasing.
Well, you're just looking, purchasing, you're just looking at it. And those townhouses are for sale, and they're for sale at a particular price. Now, if you go back from that, they may have bought that site 2 years ago, and they would have just bought it like you do buy a site. It might be an old house on a block of land that's zoned to do some townhouses. It's just an investment purchase at that point. It's not a development purchase, it's just an old house and a block of land. Don't have an approval. So that's just a normal loan. When you get your approvals, now we need to get the construction finance so we can do the whole project. Now that might be month 10. So month 1, we've bought the property. Month 10, we've got all our approvals through, everything's done. And now we've organised our builder, we're ready to go, we're getting our construction finance, and now we can finish our construction. So that will be the build cost in month 10. So we buy the site now at today's price. In 10 months' time, it'll be the build cost in month 10, so you might add 3 or 4% onto what it is now. Then we're selling by the time we build it, we're selling in month 22, 23, 24. That's the finished product. So that's when we're selling it. So and no crystal balling, what's it going to be there? Well, I think it's pretty obvious that in 20 months, 22, 24 months, when you're selling that product down the track, it's going to be more than it is now. Because of all the positive drivers that are out there. And, as we talked about, the lack of supply that's going to be coming through, the strong demand, of course it's going to be more. The corrections have already been made in the past for that rapid price growth we had and so forth. So there's this variance. And so in terms of replacement value, And this is the same in everything. It's in manufacturing, same with cars, same with anything. If something costs a bit more to produce as time goes on, then you have to sell it for more as time goes on, because everyone has to make a profit, whether it's a car manufacturer or a property developer. Now, if property developers don't make a profit, they're not going to develop. If they don't develop, there's not going to be any dwellings. If there's a shortage of dwellings, and we know what happens, prices go up. So all that happens, and we've seen it in the rental market, we've seen it in the other market, a shortage, a strong demand, low supply drives prices up in any commodity.
And so when you're talking replacement value, that's even somebody who already owned a property that they bought for $600,000 now becomes, to replace it costs $950,000 or whatever that is, as an example. And that just drives the price of everything else up, doesn't it?
Yeah, and new properties are always worth more than second-hand properties, older properties, so they're always going to be ahead. So just on the property development cycle of how that works, yes, it costs us a bit more to build the property now, and we may pay a bit more for the site, going to pay a bit more for the build. If we add our profit margin on, then they have to sell for more. And so it has to be that way, that to produce property, it has to be profitable enough for a developer, profitable enough for a builder and all the consultants and everybody and the financier and everybody that's involved in it. And so that alone drives the value of property up. So if something's for sale today at $1 million and we're going to produce the same product, only we're buying a site today and that product won't be produced until 2 years, let's say, then that product will be more, and it has to be, because everybody has to make a profit, and that's replacement value. And that just drives it. I mean, it's the way it's been for forever.
I remember a few weeks ago we had that conversation about financiers, and I'd never put those two together, that financiers want to lend money because that's how they make money.
They have to lend money.
Because we always feel like, well, I know talking to people going to the financier, it's hopefully I get a loan or they'll lend me money. But you forget that they have a business, and their business is loaning money, so that's where their income comes from as well.
Yeah, so, particularly non-bank financiers. I mean, banks these days charge so many fees, they make pretty good money even before they lend, but they still lend and need to make a profit. But the non-banks don't charge, like their fees are up front. They haven't got ongoing fees like a bank, so they need to get their money out. They might be paying an investor, 7 or 8% to put their money with them. They have to lend that out at least a 2% margin, and then they charge like application fees. So they have to do that to make money. And so this is just part of the cycle that just keeps happening. Developers have to make a profit, financiers make a profit, like I said.
Everyone's got to clip the ticket on the way through.
Everybody clips the ticket on the way through to produce a product at the other end. And that product will have a profit margin for the developer and everybody else that's in there. And that's what that product is worth. And
Bob, do you think that people are back into the purchasing realm now? Or do you think that the average purchaser, not the developer,
an investor? Or?
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, let's have
people
that. Let's just make that two then. One, people buying houses. I'll answer these separately. And two, investors. Do you think both of those markets are back in buying? They never stopped, or they're feeling more confident and they are? What do you think it is?
They only slow down. I mean, you can have times when there's more people in the rental market, but then there comes a tipping point where they'll go out of the rental market, assuming they can. I mean, there's some people that will be permanently locked into a rental market. But
you mean purchasers, people buying? No, what are you talking about?
Well, I'm talking about people coming through. Often, like you think of a younger couple, they get a job, and then they meet each other, then they decide to move in together, and then maybe get married, maybe hold that off, and they move into a property. So they rent for a while, but everything goes well, and then they end up buying, and that's sort of the cycle, that people buy. So it always remains. I mean, you can have a slight variance in terms of is it a bit of a rental, like are there more people in the rental market
rather than in the purchasing market?
Yeah, maybe that's because I mean, housing affordability, that's sort of what we're going to, and that's a whole other subject that you could do 3 or 4 podcasts on.
I was doing more. I was thinking less on affordability and more on people's drive to, we want to buy now, or no, we're really going to hold off. I was really going in that space.
Yeah, it can be a generational thing. I mean, traditionally, Australians love property.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate property, you know, and yeah, shares, sure, but, you know, everyone loves property in Australia. You know, you go to the States, it's less of a thing. I mean, people like property over there, but I mean, shares are the go for investment. Property less so, but there's reasons for that, and it's all structured quite differently. But by and whole, people want to own property, and not everybody. But you either buy it or you rent it, or you freeload somewhere on a relative. But either way, you know, you don't want to be living on the streets, and obviously there are people that do, but we're talking about the mainstream is that, you know, food and shelter.
And I think we've pretty much covered everything, Bob. Is there any other reason that you think we should discuss why property development is a good thing to get into?
I'm just pretty bullish about the future, and have been for a little while. Interest rates pretty well tapped out, inflation getting under control, a big, you know, strong demand, limited supply, and actually diminishing in relation to population. Overseas migration, normal organic growth, just the strong desire that Australians have for property. I mean, I just see it as a good time. Remember, you know, you buy a property today, you might not be selling it as a developer for 12 months, 2 years, you know, depending on the type of project. So there is that little lag as well, which is good. And if anything, I see things, values. There's not many pundits out there that aren't predicting price growth. And I mean, every month last year, properties went up in value. Yeah. But they only went up a tiny bit. I can see with supply and demand that's going to escalate more.
Great. Well, that's why we believe, and Bob, after 40 years in this industry, thinks that we're looking forward positively in property development. So if you're interested, actually, we've got our masterclass next Saturday, which by the time this comes out will be 2 days later. So this comes out Thursday or Friday. So next Saturday, the 6th of April, I believe, 9 a.m. kickoff. And check where it is in your state. I should know the answer to that, but I don't, because I think the next day daylight saving kicks in. A little bit of confusion there. Yeah. There'll be a link below.
I think daylight saving's already kicked in by then.
I think it's the Sunday. Is daylight saving tomorrow?
Sunday.
Yeah, I think it's next week.
Right. It's usually the first Sunday of
I think it is.
April and October.
Anyway, this is for people who are new to property development and just want to have a look at the process. Bob will take you through the process of what it is. It's a free event. At the end, we will tell you about what we have to offer people like yourself. No obligation. It is a great event. People always down for the full time, which says...
Also, I'll be talking about some ways of getting into property development, even if you don't have much money. I mean, that's how I got in, and plenty of other people that we know, plenty of people in our community.
Yep.
There are some creative ways of doing it. You don't have to wait around till you save your fortune.
No.
So I'll talk a bit about that as well.
Yeah, so that's next Saturday. The link will be below. You'll need to register to receive the Zoom link. No, we don't send it out afterwards. So if you want to come along to that, you are welcome to. We would love to see you there. Other than that, anything else, Bob?
Not really. I think I've said it all. I'm looking forward. Well, I'm not looking forward to the future. We're making the future all the time by being in the present. You know, we were buying sites when people are scratching their head trying to work out what's going on. We're more bullish now. I mean, we don't just do resi, we do industrial. It's good. It's a great time.
Yeah, it is a great time. Okay, thanks, Bob, for your insights, and we will catch everybody next week. Bye.
See you then.